Are you ready, Nicole? Okay. So, all right, well, welcome back. We're going to talk about thinking and feedback. So you've done your intro to centers and you've done your centers. One thing that we forgot to mention is as your children are cleaning up centers, they begin to migrate to the meeting place for thinking and feedback. One of us, and it's usually me, I go to anchor that group. I go to sit in that group and make sure everyone knows where they need to be. And I chat with them or sing some songs with them as they finish cleaning up centers and make their way over for thinking and feedback. So Nicole, you can go ahead. So thinking and feedback is a whole group conversation that occurs after centers. It is a time for the children to learn from and with one another as they discuss and reflect on a piece of work. It involves observation, listening, asking and answering questions, and offering constructive feedback and suggestions. So in all of the photos in this presentation are items that I have chosen as the teacher at one time or another in the past couple of years to show at Thinking and Feedback. She had the materials for exploratory play of Wheels and Ramps, which we were exploring in Unit 6 after reading Make Way for Ducklings. And she had built this. And so we brought it to Thinking and Feedback to go through the process. So it occurs after centers. It's a whole group activity. We meet in the meeting area. It's approximately 5 to 20 minutes long. At the beginning of the year, it's super quick and short. It's probably only lasts 5 minutes. But by the end of the year, I've had some really great conversations with my children that last 20 to 25 minutes. And what it is that you're highlighting a piece of work that's been done by an individual student or a collaborating group of students. The materials that you need is an artifact or a piece of work, such as a painting, a sculpture, written work, projected photo, or a video. So this piece of work here was for an activity called Making Signs, and they had written the letters for their stop sign. So we brought that to Thinking and Feedback because that center activity hadn't gotten a lot of traffic that day. And sometimes showing something at Thinking and Feedback gets the children inspired to try it the next day. And then you also need the visuals for the Thinking and Feedback protocol. Nicole, if you stop sharing for a moment, I'll show my visuals and then we can continue. All right. So these are the visuals which are on the main DOE website for the Pre-K for Me program. And I just printed them out in color, laminated them, and have them attached together. And this just hangs in my meeting area. So the first one is looking, where we're looking at the work. We're not talking. We're noticing the details. And then when we're ready to share what we notice, we might say, I notice or I see, and then the children will share what they notice about the work. And as we go through the process, I just flip the cards and kind of cue the discussion. And then we are listening to the student who made the work, talk about their work, the materials they used, or the process. Then we are wondering. We might say, how did you, or I wonder why. And a lot of times at the beginning of the year, you hear the same questions. How did you make that? And then the next 3 children will say, how did you make that? And we'll just remind them, well, remember, they used paper and pen to make that. So you can model the questions that you'd like asked at this time, especially at the beginning of the year. And then the last step in the protocol is suggesting or inspiring. So children might feel inspired to try that and they want to share that with their peer, or they might have a suggestion to make it different or better, or for that peer to try a new idea. And I have some examples of that as we work through the presentation. Thanks, Nicole. All right, so to prepare for Thinking and Feedback, during center time, as you're either anchoring or you're up and about and you're seeing what's going on in your room, you're going to choose one piece of work from a child or a group of children. And it might be as simple as something you like or something the child would like feedback on. And I'll share Caden's story in just a moment. It might be something that will support and enrich the curriculum, such as a book that my friend Sully made. We do have a video of that Thinking and Feedback we can show at the end. But what was special about the book is he made labels within the book, and I really wanted to show that to the children to encourage them to do that as well. You may choose something from a center that is not as busy to encourage the children to want to try that center the next day, or something done by a child who's ready to share work. Maybe sometimes I keep track of who's shared and make sure that everyone gets a turn. Sometimes it just happens organically. And then this was her nature portrait that she shared. So some of the rules for feedback and suggestions, really for my class that I just like to share, it's not necessarily in the guiding documents. I always encourage my students to give feedback in a way that is kind and helpful, and to receive feedback with thanks. So it's their choice whether or not they follow the suggestions and feedback that they're given, but we always say thank you for your feedback, and we always tell the person who shared that day, thank you for sharing. So you're going to follow the protocol, which I just showed to you, and we can break this down one by one. And I have to say, in this photo was a photo I showed during thinking and feedback, because I wondered what she was doing. And so I took a picture of her, and during thinking and feedback, she shared that she was walking around the ice and counting her steps and measuring it. And that led to a 4-day study where everyone went out every day at recess and walked around the ice to measure it. And then we kept track on a graph. So when you're looking, the whole group is looking quietly at the work, and we are taking time to observe it. When you are noticing, the children are describing what they see. In my class, they raise their hands, and I choose them one at a time to share what they notice or see. And they may notice colors or shapes or patterns or materials that were used, or letters or numbers that they know. Sometimes they don't necessarily know the letters yet at the beginning of the year, but they know, oh, I see a letter. And so they'll mention that. And the child whose work it is quiet and they're listening. So now they are listening, and the presenting child tells about their work. And sometimes the child will ask for specific feedback. Sometimes we bring something to thinking and feedback that the child's having a problem with, and they'll say, you know, I made this, I use these materials, but it keeps sinking or tipping over, like you'll see with Caden's boat in just a moment. So then the next step is wondering, where the children ask questions of the presenter. How did you make that? How did you, sometimes they say, how did you know how to make that? What materials did you use to make that? What is that detail on that page with the S? This photo here is they had created a neighborhood in one of the first 2 units, and we shared this photo during thinking and feedback. And yes, the question I hear the most is, how did you make it? Especially at the beginning of the year. And then suggesting and inspiring, where the children provide feedback and share ideas that are inspired by what was shared. And so I think the next is moving on to Caden's story, which will kind of give a better idea of what the process looks like. Nope. So thinking and feedback often carries over into the next day. So for example, at Intro to Centers, I may remind the children, yesterday at Thinking and Feedback, and I heard Sarah do that with you guys today during her presentation, Elliot suggested we make a block structure more stable by adding more blocks around the base. And these are all vocabulary words that we had been working on. If you'd like to try this during centers, and then we introduce the centers and move on as normal. Or I might remind a child of an idea he had during Thinking and Feedback, or a way that he was inspired, and provide the materials for that child to follow through on the idea. So here is the story of Caden's boat, and there's Caden, used with permission, of course. So in Unit 3, which is Wind and Water, we read a story called Gilberto in the Wind. And through Let's Find Out About It and our center-based work, we learn the parts of a sailboat, we make plans, we gather materials to make our own boats. And the objective some of the time is to build a boat that will float. So Caden follows all the directions. He makes his plan, he gathers his materials. His boat has the 3 parts we've learned about. He brings his boat to the water table at the Discovery Center and he thinks it will float and it just tips over and sinks. Very sensitive little guy, came to me with tears in his eyes and he asked for help with his boat, and I could tell him what he needs to do to make it more balanced or to help it float. But instead, I suggest he bring his boat to Thinking and Feedback, and he can ask his peers for help and ideas on how to make his boat float. So we follow the protocol. They look at his boat. They notice the materials he used. They notice that it's wet. They listen to him share his work. He tells them that his boat tipped over and he asks if they have any ideas. And they wonder why he chose the paper that he used, why he chose the egg carton for the hull. They wonder if it tipped over right away, or maybe did it just fill with water and sink and tip over? And then they share some of their suggestions with him. So they say, what about a different hull? That one tipped over, it's not stable. I used white paper on my boat. Do you want to use white paper too? I noticed the bottom is circle. You can try a different shape. That might float. Oh, the sail is way at the top. It's heavy. Heavy didn't float. And you also have to understand, this is unit 3. So they've been doing Thinking and Feedback for about 4 or 5 months at this point. So the next day at Intro to Centers, I remind Caden of all the ideas that his peers had for him during Thinking and Feedback and ask him if there's anything he'd like to try. I make sure he has access to those materials and I let him go do it. He makes a new plan. His boat has all the parts. He follows all the directions again, and it floats this time in the Discovery Center. So we bring the boat back to Thinking and Feedback. So here on the left is the first boat that tipped over and did not float. And then the one on the right is the one that floated. So they look at Caden's new boat and they notice it's a different shape. The old one was circle on the bottom and this one is square. The bottom is flat. It's in the middle, meaning the Play-Doh and the mast, or rather meaning the Play-Doh. Whereas you can't really tell from the photo, the other one, he had the Play-Doh really pushed up to one side, so it tipped over. So they said, now it won't tip over. It's different paper. It's more sturdy. And then that's kind of like how the process worked to help Caden really critically think about solving his problem and using his peers' ideas and feedback to facilitate that process. So other things to keep in mind about Thinking and Feedback is that you want to phase in each step slowly. At the very beginning of the year, I might just do looking. We're looking at a piece of work by a friend, and maybe we're noticing some details. And as we build up that process, I'll add each step one at a time very slowly. I use works in progress, like Caden's boat as well, so that feedback can be used to improve the work. Sometimes I just choose something I really like. If I'm looking for something, I usually choose it, but every once in a while, it's the end of Centers and I don't have something and I just grab something off the art easel. I modeled the good questions that I'd like to hear. How did you decide to sort those materials? How did you construct your boat? And I'm trying to also use the vocabulary that we've been working on. What materials did you use? What are you planning to do next in your process? However, the children should and will lead the discussion as much as possible. Sometimes for this, though I do stadium seating at most of our meeting times, sometimes it may be appropriate to seat them in a circle and put the artifact in the middle. Most of the time they sit stadium seating and I hold the object and the child sits within the group. There are other classrooms where the child sits in a presenting chair or a special chair and they come up and hold the item. Some of the things that I love about Thinking and Feedback is that it helps create a supportive and collaborative atmosphere in the classroom. I hear the children use the language in other parts of our day. We were doing a read aloud of Kitten's First Full Moon, where all the illustrations are in black and white. And one of my students, Olivia, said, I noticed that the illustrations are black and white, and I wonder why they did that. I suggest they use color. Um, I like that the children are engaged in developing critical thinking skills. It's an opportunity for self-reflection and problem solving. There's a lot of oral language and vocabulary used to describe the work and reflect on the work. It develops a respect for different ideas. You give and receive constructive feedback from your peers, and children who carry the ideas into the next day have a new sense of purpose. This is also something in our district, we do pre-K for me, K for me, and we do components of Focus on First from the Boston Public School curriculum. And the thinking and feedback process is something that the teachers at those grade levels have noticed carrying with the children throughout the process. They notice, or the teachers notice, that the children are using the language and the process to give feedback to one another in a way that is respectful and constructive.
Perfect. Thanks, Melissa. I'm going to move forward in just a moment. Melissa was kind enough to share a video with us of thinking and feedback happening in her classroom. Must have been 2 years ago now, which seems easy to think about. So I'll share that in just a minute. But one thing I wanted to highlight from these 3 pieces that we've discussed this morning is that how critical they are, how purposeful they are. So you'll think back to, 8:45, 9 o'clock this morning when we were sort of running through all of the components of pre-K for me. And there's a lot. And I know many teachers work in classrooms that are not full day classrooms. And you're probably starting to think, oh my goodness, how am I going to fit this all in? And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that towards the end of the day tomorrow. But I did just want to reiterate that there are parts of this program that are non-negotiable, right? So if you plan to implement this in your classroom and use it to fidelity, read aloud, intro to centers, and this thinking and feedback are non-negotiables. They're not things that you can choose to do, choose to swap out, do one day, skip the next day, etc. The learning scope and sequence for students throughout these 6 units of study are very intentional and aligned to our learning standards. So by skipping or picking and choosing what you do, you're really doing a disservice to the full scope of learning and the access to that learning that those students are going to have. So we spent a lot of time this morning, let's see, it's already 11 o'clock, so a little over 2 hours, digging into only 3 components. But they're the 3 meatiest pieces of this program. And we had said before, centers, as far as time frame goes, is really the big chunk of time. The other components come into play, but are not as time consuming as the centers. So this whole morning piece, intro to centers, and thinking and feedback, is a solid hour and 10, 15 minutes of your day, right? It's the real beef of the program. And the other pieces, SWIFL, let's find out about it, read aloud, continue to build on all these concepts and continue to stretch the children's learning in other ways. So you're going to find naturally, regardless of what you implement in your classroom, that students are drawn to and engaged with different parts of the curriculum, different parts of the program, I'm supposed to say, my apologies, at different times. So some students are going to really thrive in centers. Other students are really going to thrive in SWIFL, right? And those pieces are equally important to implement and utilize throughout the course of your week. So just really wanted to draw attention to the fact that there's a lot of components. They're not all an hour long, right? Some of them are 5 to 10 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes, you name it. Small groups is another one that I failed to mention. So they're all really important, but this intro to centers, thinking and feedback is more often than not the morning part of a teacher's day. You guys fight back that with me if you think otherwise.
No, I agree with you. I feel like, you can do intro to centers and centers, but what really brings meaning to the learning process is closing it out with thinking and feedback and providing this time for them to discuss and share with each other. And I say 5 to 20 minutes. The 20 minutes is fairly rare. I would say it's more 10 to 15 minutes most of the time throughout the year, but every once in a while, they just get so engaged in a conversation about something and I just let it go and don't stop it. And that's going to last a while. And then someone had a question in the chat box about whether or not to start, at the start of the year, or do you wait till you're starting with the curriculum? And I'm fairly comfortable with the curriculum at this point that I do start at the beginning of the year. Program. Oh, thanks. Well, ding. And this is my favorite component. And so I'm going to make sure to include this as much as I can, because you can always start with the looking. You can always choose something the children made that day or the day before, and you can share that with the group. And then if that's all you're comfortable with until you start the curriculum, then at least you're working in getting to know that component of it. There is another question.
It's a good question.
Oh,
Oh, I heard that in the background.
I have my
So
answer.
can you
The main
can you read
DOE
it out
might have
loud?
their answer. What's that?
Can you read the question out loud, or do you want
Sure. Is circle time, where we discuss calendar, weather, etc., not necessarily important because it's not incorporated or built in the schedule? Do you think it should be still put into the routine? So I think that we should hear the answer from the main DOE. I can share my
Okay,
answer.
add on to me, Melissa, with your experience at the end,
Okay.
if it's similar or totally different. So this is a question we get asked, bar none, all the time. It's a really common routine in early childhood classrooms for teachers to instruct or sort of model through a calendar routine, right? Where we talk about the days of the week, we talk about the seasons, we talk about the months, we talk about the year, and we have a visual aid for students, and we're adding a day each time, etc. I get it, totally get it. If you're implementing pre-K for me, that's not scheduled in the day at all. Which is a huge shift in thinking for so many of our teachers, because like I said, that's just something that it's embedded in so many of us. What I would say is this: calendars are incredibly important for young children to have access to, right? It's a concept that we want them to learn, that past, present, future, but it's a huge concept. And it's one that, like I said, we want them to learn, we want them to have access to. However, drawing attention to it rotely every single day doesn't necessarily get us there. So how often, and I know this happens because I've been in classrooms and seen it with my own two eyes, it's May, right? It's May, the first week, May 2nd, say, and you have your whole group and you present to the students your calendar and you say, if last month was April, this month is June, October, July, right? The concept or the understanding that the next month is May isn't necessarily there. And theoretically, you've been working on it since September, right? And it's still not solid information yet. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be. The other piece that I want to argue too is that according to our early learning standards, which align with national early learning standards, students don't need to rote count past, 20, I think, for the end of pre-K school year. And yet in September, we're practicing to count to 30. In October, we're counting to 31. In November, we're back to 30. In December, we're back to 31. Where's 32? Where's 33, right? There's numbers beyond that. So while the calendar might help in a visual aid of counting, there are so many other ways that are appropriate to students' interests throughout the day that facilitate learning and counting, right? Melissa mentioned her students were outside counting steps around an ice block, right? At the manipulative table, you might be sorting and counting and facilitating those concepts in that space. Calendar is not the only space to talk about yesterday, today, tomorrow, or to look forward to big events like somebody's birthday or a field trip or a holiday. So sort of why I say have a calendar present, have a real calendar present, like the old school flip ones, right? Point out that, yeah, today is Monday, tomorrow we get to go to art class, or tomorrow we get to go to gym and see Miss Nicole, whatever it may be. but it doesn't have to be a drawn out day to day. We're all going to watch and listen and spit back the day of the week, what day of the month it is, what month it is, what season it is, right? Those are natural pieces that are going to come out through our interaction during centers and the other components. You don't have to plan calendar as a set time. But what do you guys do?
We do not do a calendar. I can speak for myself and for the person sitting next to me because I just asked her. Do you guys do a calendar? No calendar. I will also say though that you guys are all educators in the field who are researchers in the field who are capable of doing the research. And if this is something that's really hard for you to let go, do your research and find ways to make it developmentally appropriate if you still really need to include it. However, there's so much in this program that covers those same concepts. You don't need it. And if it's developmentally inappropriate to do it, and if the activities that we're telling you work and are more engaging for those concepts are available to you, that's what you can be doing. I think I hesitate to say, don't do it. You're not gonna have time to do it, right? You're not gonna have time to do it. I don't do it because I know what my children are getting in this program, and it's just a waste of time. I don't have time for it. I do a short morning meeting. We talk about what's coming up for that day. I've sometimes considered a linear calendar. I've never implemented it. Sometimes I think about a morning message. I have so many issues with that. There's just ways to do things that are developmentally appropriate though with this age group. And so I encourage you, if you're having a hard time letting go of something that you really love to do with children, just do your research and find ways to make it possible in your room if you really want to do it.
You could throw a wall calendar in your dramatization area during when they're taking care of babies or during like when there's doing laundry in there. Yeah, there are other ways that you can add it in that is going to connect with real life with the children. Yeah, and exposure.
I also want to just quickly add from a class observation lens, those things are very rote, and it's the recall of information. And I think it's really important to stop and ask yourself, is this important? How can I make this more engaging? How can I deepen the learning around this in conversations? Because the rote part is not really important at this age, and it's not something through a class lens. It's not something that we really want to see. So that's important.
Right.
Also.
Right. So in humor me for just a minute. So let's say, for example, that you're not doing calendar. It's not part of your schedule in the way that you've maybe implemented it in the past. But it's a Monday morning. Your students all come back from a weekend away at their homes, and Marcy, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Marcy comes up to you. She's your student in your classroom, and she says, "Miss Nicole, guess what? I'm so excited. Tomorrow we're leaving for California to go visit Grammy." And you're like, "Wow, that's amazing. You must be so excited to go visit Grammy in California." But you know, as the teacher and from interacting with the family perhaps, that they're not leaving tomorrow because tomorrow's Tuesday. They're actually leaving on Friday, right? Because the family's been in touch with you. They let you know that Marcy's going to be out next week. You're leaving Friday for California. So Marcy's excited. She thinks she's leaving tomorrow for California. And you might say, share in that excitement, right? That's an awesome experience for a student to get away and perhaps fly or whatever they might do. And so you might say, "I talked to mommy about that. She told me you were going to visit Grammy in California. She mentioned you were leaving on Friday. Does Friday sound familiar? Yeah, tomorrow, Friday," right? Here's a calendar misconception in that child. They think that Friday's tomorrow, when in actuality, tomorrow's Tuesday. I think when I checked my calendar this morning, come here, let me show you. Here we are, today's Monday. Tomorrow, the calendar tells me that tomorrow is Tuesday, and you're leaving on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we have 4 more days. Do you want to make a countdown? And maybe you make something with that child, some type of visual aid to help them see that they're not leaving tomorrow, they're leaving Friday, right? So there's an interaction around the concept of a calendar, days of the week, future planning, that's specific to the learning of and understanding of that child, right? The entire class didn't need to sit crisscross applesauce, eyes on the teacher to learn that because they don't care about Grammy in California, right? Only Marcy does. That's specific to her and her learning. And so you facilitate that with her. And she might be ready to start learning that concept of future learning and calendar dates, whereas another student might not be. And the learning that they have with the calendar is going to be a little different, but still very meaningful. So hopefully that sort of clarifies my point of view of implementing calendar.
Nicole, Morgan has something to add about.
Oh, I
Aiden.
just wanted to, I got really excited when Melissa was talking about thinking and feedback because she does such a good job explaining the components, and she gets me all excited every time I listen to her talk about it. But I think that thinking and feedback is so important for so many reasons. And I love that she always shares Caden's story because failure is really important for these guys. And it's important for them to learn that failure is a good thing. And that's how we learn, and how to deal with failure gracefully, with lack of a better word, or for lack of a better word. I really had a lot to say and I kind of lost it, but anyway, it's super important. But that was a great way to learn that I did this and it didn't work, but he got constructive criticism or feedback from his classmates, and he tried and tried again. And that's what we want these kids to do, is to keep trying and keep learning, and knowing that, if you do something the first time, it doesn't mean that it's over. Right. You can continue to work on those. And also one more thing, sometimes if there's a center and not a lot of people go to it, but one person did, I will use that for my thinking and feedback. And then that will get more kids to go to that center. Okay, go ahead.
Wow. Great. Good job. All right.
Thank you, Morgan, for bringing us back to thinking and feedback, because I really want to show the video of Melissa. So Melissa, you can introduce us to what we're going to see, but then I also want to just pose to viewers, after watching the video, I want you to think about what you saw, what you heard, and what that means for you moving forward into a new school year, implementing thinking and feedback with your students. And if some of you would be sort of brave enough to share that thinking in the chat box or by unmuting once the video is over, I really want to allow time for that. So go ahead, Melissa, let us know what we're going to see.
Okay, so what we're going to see is a demonstration of thinking and feedback. So at the beginning of the video, I'm playing a letter game with them that is in our Songs, Wordplay, and Letters program. And while I'm waiting for everyone to get to the group, and then I dive into thinking and feedback. So you'll see me holding up the cue cards for the protocol. You'll see me holding up the item, which is a book that was made by my friend Sullivan. And I chose it because he put labels within the book. And that's something I've been talking with them about doing in the Writing Center. And I just loved his demonstration of it. I apologize if you can't hear it well. So hopefully you can. The person moving the iPad around, it makes like a weird sound every time she does it, but hopefully you'll get the gist of it as we go through. So yeah.
It's fine.
Let me see. There's a little red stool that the kids sit on too. It does have a long line like an.
I know.
Chloe.
C.
C, does C have a long line?
No.
I'm gonna put C over here. Nope, C has it.
I know.
Madeline? You can look at our board if you need some ideas.
My mom is like this.
Ooh, N's a good guess. We guessed that because it has a long line, but it's not an N.
I know.
Sully.
E.
Ooh, it is an E.
It's
It's
with
a big line and it's little lines across.
Oh, that's what I have in a minute.
Oh, how many in your name?
Two. I have one. I have one. I have two. No.
All right, kiss your brain if you knew that was an E.
I gotta say that.
I know, that's why I had you kiss your brain. I knew you were gonna say that. All right, so it's time for thinking and feedback. So your bodies are still, you're ready, showing me that you're ready. You're ready, Gabe?
Yeah.
All right,
because first we are looking, which means our voices are off, and we're really looking. And I'll show you each page, and you're gonna think about some of the details that you're noticing so that you'll be able to share what you notice. You're looking with your eyes at this book made by Sully. And now we are noticing. And you might say, I notice, or I see. And if you have something to share, you should raise your hand. Landon, can you sit on your bottom so I can see the friends behind you? Landon, what do you notice?
I noticed this while watching the book.
Say it one more time.
Oh, my bad. Sorry. I was trying to edit the sound.
Okay, I was gonna say, before you start that again, there's,
Yeah, I'm not. It's a difficult audio anyway. I was trying to. Sorry, everybody. I know that this is frustrating. I was trying just to see what I could do on my end, and I thought, yes, there is, that there might be closed captioning.
it's fine.
Let me see. Friends.
Oh, let me fast forward to around where we were. Best laid plans, everybody, right?
Lines across.
Oh, that's what I have in a minute.
How many in your name?
Two. I have two. I have one. I have two. No.
All right, kiss your brain if you knew that was an E.
Oh my God, I did it again. Holy cannoli.
So it sounds like the audio is coming through, but the video is just a little bit choppy.
If she opened it directly from the drive.
Oh, maybe.
Instead of the embedded.
From the Google, you mean?
Yeah.
I can try that. If folks just want to bear with me for 2 seconds, let me get there.
5-minute stretch. 2
Yeah.
seconds.
2-minute stretch.
There were a couple questions in the chat. Oh, those were from, okay.
Oh, there was one about centers though.
Should centers be in the beginning of the day as opposed to the afternoon?
Wherever you have a block of time.
Yes. So it really depends on where you have that block of
A
time
full
in your
hour.
day. It's a full hour plus
Plus
intro to
interest.
centers and thinking and feedback. For me, that's in the morning because that's when I have the most time. For other teachers, it's in the afternoon because they do specials and other stuff in the mornings.
So wherever you have that chunk that you can do it all together.
We'll work on schedules tomorrow.
Mhm.
The other thing I can try one other thing, just a second.
Okay.
Means our voices are off, and we're really looking. And I'll show you each page, and you're gonna think about some of the details that you're noticing so that you'll be able to share what you notice. You're looking with your eyes at this book made by Sully. And now we are noticing. And you might say, I notice, or I see. And if you have something to share, you should raise your hand. Landon, can you sit on your bottom so I can see the friends behind you? Landon, what do you notice?
I noticed this while watching the book.
Say it one more time.
Daddy put there's a block in the.
Sally put some black in the book, I
Oh,
think. is what
thank
it
you.
says.
Sally put some black in the books.
Yeah.
So you noticed the color. He used a lot of black. Rents, what did you notice?
I noticed that. Look to the first page.
Sure.
I noticed that it's like a building.
That it looks like a building. He used a rectangle and a triangle at the top. What do you notice?
I noticed that he made letters and then he made animals.
You notice maybe some of them look like animals, and he labeled his pictures with letters. do you notice, Madeline?
I noticed why it's black and blue.
You notice that it's black and blue and green.
And it's a bunny.
You think it looks like a bunny?
I know.
Layson, what do you notice?
I noticed that one looks like a dog.
That maybe one looks like a dog.
One at the end. That one was
Maybe this one looks like a dog. What's this letter?
Cat.
Gabe, do you notice something?
I noticed he made two dogs.
Maybe he made two dogs. We'll hear from him in just a moment. Kaden, did you notice?
I noticed it's a name on the back.
There's a word on the back.
It is
The. Landon, what do you notice?
I noticed there's a snake in that book.
Maybe there's a snake in that book.
I just saw one.
So now we're going to
Listen.
So our voices are off. Sully, tell us what you made today.
The fourth page is a skyscraper. The next page is a skyscraper and a house.
It's a house.
And that one was a D of a dog, and that one is a teapot.
This one's a teapot.
And that's a shadow of a cat, and that's a shadow of a human.
This is a shadow of a cat, and this is a shadow of a human. Tell us the title of your book.
Shadow.
Shadows. And who is the author?
Sully.
Sully. And what does it say on the back?
The end.
The end.
So that's the back.
That is the back.
Because it said the end.
So now maybe that you've heard from Sully, you're wondering something. Like, how did you, or I wonder why. You promise I'll call you. Chloe, what are you wondering?
I wonder, he made a lot of black and a little bit of blue and a little bit of green.
Why did you use so much? Because they are shadows. Jackson, what are you wondering?
How did you make that?
How did you make this?
I colored it and then I colored it in with black.
Oh, first he made the outlines of each picture, and then he colored it in with black. Do you have a question? What are you wondering?
I wonder, red on the front and green.
You noticed that there's blue and green on the front? Well, you could ask him, why did you choose to write your name and title in color?
How did I put
Why did you choose color for the cover of your book?
because I wanted to.
Landon, thanks for being so patient. Are you wondering something?
I wanted. It's because that is dark and that's a teapot for the shadows.
They are the shadows of the dog and the teapot. What tools did you use to make your book?
I just use them to mark.
You just used what? Marker and paper. Madeline?
How did you make that pen?
How did he make it?
I did the outline in black and I colored it in black.
Oh, first he drew the outline in black, and then he colored it in with black, just like some of the illustrators that we've been studying in our books.
The cat book.
Right, just like the kitten book. Gabe, you guys are wondering a lot today.
I noticed that he made a skyscraper.
I noticed that he made a skyscraper, and I noticed that he labeled it with a S.
Spider.
All right.
different.
Okay, are you wondering something?
I wonder that.
Do you have a question for Sally?
Sally, how did you make that without seeing anything?
How did you make the skyscraper without seeing it? He's wondering how you knew it was those shapes.
I don't know.
Well, are you inspired by any skyscrapers you see?
Yeah.
Where?
I saw some documentary.
You saw somewhere?
On a city documentary.
On a city documentary. Oh, a city documentary. Also, Rents, if you're looking for inspiration, you can look around the classroom because there's pictures of skyscrapers, right? All right, so now let's move on to suggesting or inspiring. You might have an idea that Sally could try next time, or maybe you want to tell him that you are so inspired and you want to try this too. Landon?
Then Sally, maybe next time you make a snake book puppet.
Or maybe next time you would make a snake puppet book.
Or maybe a snake shadow book.
Or maybe a snake shadow book.
Maybe me and him can make the same book.
Oh, maybe you could collaborate and make a book together. That's a good idea.
Maybe he can make a sleeping bat book.
Maybe he can make a sleeping bat book. Maybe you could make a sleeping bat book. You're a good author, right? Yes?
Maybe you can make a bat book.
Try making a bat. Do you guys think he's a good illustrator?
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are giving him some good ideas. Gabe, you have a suggestion? Or maybe you're inspired?
Probably next time you can make a sleeping snake.
Ooh. Brooklyn, last one.
Sorry, maybe next time you can make a tower in a book.
Ooh. There was a tower in this book. Did you see it? The skyscraper is like a tower. But maybe you can make some more. Rents.
I inspired by you should make the hamster book.
You're inspired to make a hamster book?
I like the hamster. I think me too.
All right, we're going to get ready for lunch. Yes.
I'm not now.
Okay. I'm gonna just stop the video there and stop sharing so we can sort of see Melissa and see each other. My apologies, I'm sure the audio and the video might not have been 100%, but hopefully you got the sort of the gist and was able to see Melissa's mannerism, how she facilitated that conversation. So I want to open it up to specific questions and thoughts. My specific prompt in the chat room was around watching Melissa as she holds and models the work, uses the visual aids and addresses or ignores behaviors. So what did you notice about the students and about Melissa's interactions with her students? Now remember, this is not September, right? This was what month? Do you remember, Melissa?
Yeah, it's Unit 5. So probably March or April.
Past halfway.
Yeah.
So what did you notice about her students?
I noticed that they were engaged and answering your questions. And I noticed that you were redirecting them. Like, oh, maybe you could do that with that idea. And I really liked that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Sarah. I know one thing I noticed that I'm sure others may have was that Melissa uses a strategy during thinking and feedback that works very well for every single student in her class, regardless of their ability. And that is to repeat what is said. So if a student offered a thought or a question, Melissa just repeated it, and she repeated it to Sully because that was Sully's work. The questions, the comments, the suggestions were addressed to Sully. So he was sitting sort of back in the left corner under like the chalkboard area near the block cabinet. And the rest of his peers were sitting, you know, to his side. So everything that was mentioned, Melissa reiterated to Sully, right? Because it was information for him. And then he was able to better understand what his peers were trying to say. So there's one in the chat box there, Melissa, do you see that from Gina?
I did, yep, that they seem to know the routine of what was coming next. And they know the routine, but I don't stop holding up those cards or repeating the process because I really want to give that guidance throughout the whole course of the year. But they're saying it before I say it. They say it as soon as I flip the card over, and they probably are doing that by November. And really understanding the process and the protocol.
I had another noticing, but I'm just gonna wait.
You're doing a good job sharing what you noticed, Nicole.
So it seems to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because you know your students better than me, but many students from what we could see in the video seemed eager to respond and weren't, now remember this is unit 5, like you said, so it's March, April, you know, that early spring time of year. And they've had this whole school year to sort of come familiar with this process and expectations during thinking and feedback. And they're eager to add to the conversation, and their eagerness comes through as fidgeting, perhaps, right? And so a lot of students have their hands like in your face, like, I want to say something, please call on me. How do you manage that? I saw in the video how you did, but I wondered if you could speak to that.
Yeah, so it really depends on the child at that point in the year. You know, the 3 most fidgety ones that were up front with me, that's where they thrived during our meeting time together. Sometimes when they're fidgety, you know, I often put them kind of at the back where they have more space to move. But those 3 just really need to be close to me. The little one with the blonde hair, he needs me to touch him and hold his hand and tell him that, you know, that I hear him in that way, and to like reassure him that I hear him, and I will get to his question in a moment. The one in the kind of the big, thick black sweatshirt, he just needed a short verbal, like sit down for a moment and then continue, just to remind him what my expectation was. So it's really just depending on the child. I knew them all pretty well by then, and placing them during that time where they would be successful with the process.
Exactly. There's a question in the chat box for you. Do you write down what they say to help for the next day, or how do you address what was said the day before for the next day's center?
So I've been doing this for over 21 years. I usually just remember it, but I do sometimes, if my ed tech is, you know, usually during this time, she's kind of finishing the cleaning up process and then she's joining us. She will take observational notes. If I say, you know, let's observe today and write down the things that they're saying, or if she hears them say something that she knows I will want noted, she'll jot it down on a sticky or a quick piece of paper. I'm not going to interrupt my process to stop and write something down. I'm going to use her to help facilitate that observation process, because I am so zoned in, not just on the thinking and feedback process, but also on any behaviors that may arise during that group time. But that's what she's good at too. Like, that's her strength as a former teacher. She just naturally does that anyway.
Yeah. Another comment too that Mindy mentioned was that you were slow, clear, and precise, and clearly aware of your children. So you could tell that you knew your children well. And that's a really important piece to notice, that piece around being slow, clear, and precise. this was something in my own education in this field, when I would be in the classroom, feedback from mentors or teachers, whatever it may be, to me was always to slow down, because I talk fast, I get excited, and I talk even faster, and then my heart starts to beat, and then I'm just really excited because I don't want to leave something out, and these thoughts are all coming in my head. Slow down, right? When you're talking with your students, especially in a whole group setting, when you're later on, we'll get into Swiffle, that songs, wordplay, and letters. Slow down, right? Read your poems slowly, sing the song slowly. There's a lot of processing that needs to happen between your verbal cues and the students processing and understanding. So if it feels like it's too slow, it's probably just right.
Yeah, that's definitely something I had to learn with this program because of the Swipple. You have to slow down the songs and the poetry, and that was not easy to learn how to do, but children learn on a frequency that is slower and slightly higher pitch, so you need to meet them there. And so I think that it's just translated into all the other areas for me because they respond to it better.
Right. So this was a great way, and is a great way in the classroom, to sort of close centers, right? So we introduce centers, we introduce the activity, we do the activity, and then we close it. And this is a nice big chunk of time where we take our time, go through that whole process, and it's a great way to just work through those transitions. We know so many students, especially in the beginning of the year, struggle with moving from one thing to the next. So by going from a quick whole group, a long, independent, smaller groups of centers, and then coming back together for another quick whole group, it's a great way just to help students transition through all of that work and facilitate learning throughout all of those pieces. So, great modeling. I will share my screen. I know the next one is just around reiterating questions and getting ready for our lunch break.
Yeah, we're so close.
We're so close.
That's it.
Yeah. So we have a nice 1 hour lunch that I do want to recognize and offer. So if we break from now, it's 11:45 to 12:45, take that time to take care of all of your personal needs, stretch, eat, do all those things, swap your laundry, wash a dish if you're in your home. If you're in a setting with your colleagues, interact with them, take this time to just breathe, talk about what, whether it's this program or what have you, and we will reconvene at 12:45, which I'm going to add to this slide if I can get to it.
I'm not share. Fix it. Let me share.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to keep the Zoom room open. Hold on.